Hello, everyone. I am so excited. So excited that I'm using this really fun Snapchat filter camera to bring back 99 Dev Problems. It has been a beautiful part of my day to day, or was, I should say, before taking a break. And I really miss it. And I think it's just a very lucrative opportunity to chat with people in the ecosystem, especially now. The world feels weirder than ever, to really just chat with developers and just hear about their day to day and what they're working on. So I'm super pumped to chat with Jamie today. Jamie, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hey, yeah, I'm Jamie Tanna. You may know me from my URL, jbt.me. It is actually behind me. So common joke about me in every job I've been in is that I will like bludgeon people over the head with the fact that I have a website. So yeah, it's
That's
like
good
it's
though.
literally now in the background. I have a T-shirt with it on. But yeah, so I'm a senior software engineer at Elastic of Elasticsearch, working on internal engineering productivity.
I love that. We got to chat a little bit on the pre-show. The productivity thing obviously piqued an interest for me. As we chatted about too, like I suffer from ADHD, and so productivity can be a major pain point, right? Some days, like I was just saying, I can move mountains, while other days I'm like, I can't even see the mountain. What is going on? And so, anyways, I was super intrigued about developer productivity. So, kind of diving into the show and the rest of it, I'd love to just hear about what you're building today, kind of what you're working on, how maybe we can frame it in this first before I confuse you. Let's talk about the productivity side of it, right? Like I think that is such a key topic right now. And so what does that look like for you in your role right now to focus on the actual productivity side of engineering?
Yeah, so Elastic as a company is pretty big, and so I am one of I think 6 or 7 engineering productivity teams that we have.
Oh, wow.
So I'm part of the platform organization, which manages things like Elastic Cloud, our hosted platform. And so within platform, there are 3 engineering productivity teams. And so my team is called DevFlow, and we like the
Mm,
way we describe it to people as we are left of main. So once you before you've merged something into main, we manage all that stuff. So that's things like dependency management and update tools. That's things like development environments. That's things like code quality and testing, um,
mm,
as well as like the whole CI platform as a whole. So we manage a lot of things to help internal developers have a much better experience with shipping software and providing products, platforms, and tools to just make their lives easier and build things that get out of their way as quick as possible, so they can get the real work done on top of what we're building.
yeah. Well, I mean, even just like what you said, right? The like three or four different examples, I'm like, oh yeah, those are all really painful, right? Setting up those environments, like, having everything that is, running through your CI pipeline and things. So that's a lot. That's like honestly a lot of different technical like languages and stacks that you get to get your hands in too.
Yeah, so one of my colleagues, Ellie and I, um, we've had a number of meetings in the team where like comments have come up around we own a lot of stuff, like we own a lot of different things, and so we have been going through that challenge
Yeah.
of okay, let's actually work out all the things that we own, because we thought we knew what we owned. We now have discovered like whole cupboards full of extra stuff. And as you say, like there are lots of different tech stacks. So depending on which team originally built the tooling, because around a year and a half ago we had a reorg in our part of the organization. So
Hmm.
some of our team boundaries shuffled. So we've got things that are built on top of the JVM. So we've got some Java and Kotlin tooling. We also have a large amount of Python. We have
Mm.
some of the new stuff we're building with Go, but unfortunately not as much Go as I would like, as more of a gopher. And then one of the also fun things we've got is so Elastic as like a platform builds on top of the main cloud providers, AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud, which means that a lot of our tooling also has to support all of the main providers. And then we also have some stuff on
Mm.
Kubernetes.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of balloons the amount of stuff that we have and need to know, but also can be quite a good
Right.
opportunity to brush up my skills on lots of different things at the same time.
I would love that, honestly. Like, it's been a hot minute since I've actually been an engineer in a traditional engineering role. But gosh, like the opportunity to sort of get my hands in everything, that was like what I loved, right? Is I'm like, ooh, totally different stack and language and different problems, but still being able to go in and sort of flex the skills that I had and then expand the ones that I
Yeah.
didn't, right? So you said Go and you wish you used Go more. So it sounds like Go is like maybe one of your favorite languages. What would you say? Is that accurate?
Oh yeah. So I picked it up a couple of years ago when I went to my previous job at Deliveroo, the food delivery company. Um, and
Mm,
it was one of those things that has kind of like been on the outskirts of this seems interesting. I'd like to play around with it, but I never really got around to it. And my previous company before that was
yeah.
primarily Java, and there wasn't really any scope to bring in Go, so I was like, carry on with the Java world. Um, but like when I
Yep.
came to Deliveroo and started doing it, I was like, this is really nice because um, a it's a reasonably straightforward language. Like the people usually describe it as simple, which can be a bit of a loaded
Mm-hmm.
term. But I find like it is generally straightforward to read, and it is hard to write
Mm,
code that, for instance, if you say we're looking at Java or Ruby on Rails, it may be a little bit easier to write code that you're like, what does that even do? Whereas it can be harder to do
mm-hmm.
that in Go.
Uh,
But one of the things that really like improved my life was that I could use NeoVim. So I've been a Vim user for many, many years, and more recently NeoVim. And so at previous companies, I would have to use something like IntelliJ as a Java IDE because it was the only thing that made sense.
mm-hmm.
But being able to use NeoVim is one of those things that have actually like drastically changed my mood over the years. And some of it is down to like
Ooh,
ADHD. And so one of the things there is
yeah.
if I have to context switch between like different IDEs, different tooling, I find that much more
Mm-hmm.
jarring than maybe other people would. And I put that down to
Mm,
my ADHD. And so it's things like if I can stay in just one tool with all the right key bindings, with all the things that I know and
mm-hmm.
I'm familiar with, I can be much more productive
Yep.
than, for instance, like Deliveroo, we also had Ruby on Rails code bases. So I would then have to jump into VS Code to be able to better interact with them. And I was like, it's just
Mm,
not the same.
yep.
There is like a
Yeah.
Vim emulation, but it wasn't quite good enough to actually give me no, this is my Vim. Like I know what I'm doing. I know all the key bindings. I have the plugins I need. Um, and so like some of it is muscle memory. Some of it is I don't like change. It was one of those things that
Yep.
made it really nice to be able to just stay in one thing and do like everything there.
Yep. Yeah. I like fully agree with that honestly, like the context switching, that is really, really, really hard. Like lately I've tried to go back into being more of a developer. I'm trying not to say that I'm not a developer because I still am at the end of the day, but like I'm just not flexing those skills
Mhm.
every day, you know? But like even this past weekend, I've actually been building sort of like the MVP or working towards the MVP of our actual app of what we're trying to launch. And so I was diving in, trying to like code again, right? And it's like I didn't actually have an editor. Like as of, however long ago, I didn't have an editor. I was just had like Sublime Text on my computer because I'm like every once in a while I have to edit code. And it's just like going back in and then actually trying to like work with code. Like I was using Cursor at one point, right? And I was like, this is crazy. Like I never used VS Code. And so it's like anyways, long story short, just all the context switching with different editors and different platforms and different tools is massively painful for me as well. So maybe an ADHD thing, maybe just be a
Yeah.
developer thing, right? We just want to be
Mhm.
efficient and we want to build stuff, and all these tools and stacks and frameworks and all the things just sort of, they get in the way. Obviously, it's a part of building, but I think the context switching of making all those decisions and bringing what you're trying to build to life, I think is just, it's painful in general when we are slowed down.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you have a couple open source projects. We chatted a little bit before the call. We got to hear a little bit about your day to day at Elastic. Obviously, totally open to hear more if there's more things to share there as well. But I'd love to hear about your open source projects, and what you're working on there, and just sort of what it's like to actually manage and have open source projects to begin with.
Yeah. So yeah, I on my website have a page for all the open source projects I maintain, and there are quite a few. Most of them are in very differing
Love that.
levels of support, but there's a couple at the top, the main ones that I maintain. So the first one is dependency management data, which, as you may see, I'm wearing a t-shirt for. It is the only open
Love
source
it.
project I've gone like so all in on. I've spent my personal money to like make swag. But yeah, it's something that
That's
yeah,
love.
and this was something that I think within like a year of building the project, I'd done that. Like I was like, this is love, and it is something that I feel like I am massively like bigging it up or bragging, but it has literally changed the way I work. So
Oh, I love that.
yeah, and it's like, oh yeah, but Jamie, you'd probably say that because you built it, and it's like, no, like honestly. And so what it is at the end of the day is a database for your dependency data. It is very poorly named. I am not good at naming. But yeah, so the project itself gives you the ability to get like database access to here are all the dependencies we use. And so for instance, at a couple of the companies I've worked at while I've been building it, one of the things we've done is we've set it up to collect dependency data. So for instance, like every time you push to the default branch on your repo, it will go in and it will scan what are the current dependencies, then it will build out the database. And so it gives you the ability to say, okay, where am I using a deprecated version of Node.js? Or
Oh, yeah.
or for instance, like a conversation we had last week was in about a month, the AWS SDK for Go version 1 is going end of life. So it's like, okay, how do we know where we're using it in the organization? Like one way you could go is you could go into GitHub code search, and hopefully find all the places that it's found. But for instance, with dependency management data, it's again code search, but using like SQL, you can go in and you can say, find me all the repos that have this dependency in it.
Right.
And yeah, when I say it is like changed the way I work, especially as someone who has been working on a lot of internal tooling, it's really useful. So for instance, while I was at Deliveroo, I was part of our virtual Go team. So we were building internal Go tooling and libraries to help support the rest of the organization. And one of the things we had was that a big open source project called the Gorilla Toolkit archived themselves because they had been asking for, I think, almost 2 years for people to help them. They were like, this project is very widely used, but we cannot support it with the time that we've got. Please send us money or time contributions. Naturally, no one picked up on that call. So they were like, you know what? Okay, we're going to archive the repos. They will be read-only. No one, you'll have to fork it if you want to use the package and make changes. And from there, it was a case of, okay, where are we using that dependency? And it was actually in quite a lot of our places. So we're like, okay, how do
struggle is real there?
Yeah, and it was the sort of thing that it was used everywhere because it was so good, because it was well maintained,
Mm-hmm.
and it was also like
Hmm.
it was part of our service templates. So no one ever, very few people made the
Sure.
decision to go in and use it. It was just what was available, and what was recommended. Um,
Yep.
and yeah, so then we had to make this the um, make the investigation around. Okay, how bad is it? What do we need to do?
Mm-hmm.
And like having that data available was huge. We've also used it
Yep.
for things like actual like operational incidents. So again, at delivery, we had a case where
Mm.
we consume a lot of data from Kafka, and so a lot of our services had like a
Mm.
sidecar container that would consume the data from Kafka and make it available to the rest of the application. And so we found that there was a race condition that affected a certain version of this Kafka sidecar, and we're like, okay, it is. I think it was around like 2 p.m. in the afternoon UK time,
Mm.
and deliverers, like a food delivery company, are quite careful around like meal times. So, for instance, there's the dinner time rush, which is
Sure.
around like 5 to 7 p.m.
Right.
UK time, and so it was a case of okay, we need to make sure that we've updated our most critical services before the dinner rush to make sure that we don't have any issues.
Right.
And so it was a case of okay,
Yep.
do we know which repos are affected? Yes, we do actually, because we have that data.
Mm.
Do we know
Yes.
what our most important repos are? Yes, because we have a service catalog where we actually say this is the business criticality of this service. And then we could marry the two of those up
Mm. Mm-hmm.
and say, okay, for like order them by the most important repos and also add in ownership info for those repos. So we can actually go and start paging people and say,
Yep.
like, you need to make some code changes in the next 2 hours. Otherwise, we're going to have problems. And it was things like that where, and one of the things I've found with having this sort of data is people don't really think about it as, oh, I wish I knew the answer to that. But when you have that data, maybe
Mm-hmm.
it's a little bit of like when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. But it is the sort of thing that like I've found does end up solving a lot of the questions I've got, and a lot of the questions
Mm-hmm.
definitely we within like internal tooling teams have, because we can actually go and work out okay, what frameworks are teams using, what versions of this
Yeah.
internal tool are people using, why aren't they actually updating that? Maybe let's go and reach out to find out why this team is always like 8 versions behind compared to everyone else. Yeah.
Yep. Wow. That's like, I feel like that's also one of those tools where you don't realize the value in it until you're like in that emergent situation
Mhm.
where you're like, oh shoot, something is failing, the library's not there, the dependency's not there, and now you're trying to scramble to figure all that out, right? So
Mhm.
it's a very beautiful tool to have, but maybe like when you're in that sort of challenge, you don't necessarily see the value until you're like, oh poop.
100%.
I need
Yeah.
that tool now.
And for instance,
Yeah. Oh, that's really
when
great.
was it, like 4 years ago, was the Log4Shell incident where there was the extremely critical
Mm-hmm.
vulnerability in Apache Log4j. One of the cases there was people didn't have any
I remember
idea
that.
where Log4j was used. And I think people were still surprised to find out their toaster used it.
That's scary.
Like there were literally cases of people finding it in a toaster on the network, and it's like, first of all, why does my toaster have a lot like this much software in it? And also, why is it on the network? Like, oh god, why? And so yeah, it's things like you don't
Yes.
find out until you kind of need the data that you wish you had the data, but then once you've got it, it
Yep.
does provide you some really interesting stuff.
Oh, that is like a really crazy thing to think about, right? Like my parents, it makes me just kind of laugh whenever I think about these types of things, right? Where the toaster is like has access to code that's, you know, malicious or
Mm-hmm.
can do something across your network, right? And like just thinking about people who are older, like they wouldn't even have any idea what's happening, that their toaster was connected, that that was even a potential issue. It's just wild some of the like sensitivities around this, where obviously that tool can be so incredibly powerful to help you identify those things and hopefully alleviate some of
Yeah.
these pain points.
But I guess on the flip side as well, like especially with toasters and stuff, you also don't really get a choice nowadays. It's like, oh, there are only smart toasters, there are only smart fridges, and like in the last year, I started driving, and we recently changed our car, and it's now mostly touch based, and so there's like no tactile control
Mm,
to like change the temperature in the car. And there's things like that that is like
sure.
I'm sure it's nice for them because they can do everything in software, but it's much harder to like
Yeah.
quickly go in and change the temperature or change the fan settings and stuff like that while you're driving at high speeds on a
Mm,
ropey road.
yeah.
Yeah, so it's things like that that some tech can be nice, but it is also nice to have a little bit of other stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree there. Well, it's actually funny because, like, on that same topic, my dad owns an auto repair shop. And so everything is obviously going software related, right? And
Mm,
so he doesn't know anything about software. He's been fixing cars since like, the
mm,
70s, right? Like, that's his jam is like to actually fix the
mm,
manual side of cars. And so they're like making it to a point where like he's actually going to be probably pushed out of
mm,
business where these auto shops can't even exist anymore because, yeah, it is actually really unfortunate. Like, they're taking away gosh, I can't remember what it's called, but um it's like like the something sensor. Gosh, I know what it is, but all of a sudden the word is gone. But it's a sensor that you can plug anything into, right? And get information from your
mm,
car. So if you're trying to, troubleshoot it or whatever. So they're actually making that sensor like in different areas of the world are changing that so that you have to be a dealership. You have to have the right abilities. I
mm,
know, right? That's exactly how I feel about it. Is like I love technology so much and I love what we've been able to do and I love
mm,
building stuff, right? But it's like also sometimes I feel like the way that we utilize technology isn't necessarily the best for the entire world, if that makes sense, right?
completely.
So smart toasters, I don't know that we need smart toasters, like, or cars that, people who are mechanically
Mm.
inclined but not technically inclined can't fix. Like, it just
Yeah.
doesn't feel like the right, but
Yeah, and like
so,
things like right to repair are really important. Like, um,
right,
I don't have
exactly,
any stats,
exactly.
but the amount of like technology that's thrown into landfill because people can't repair them. I'm sure
Hmm.
I'd read somewhere that there's things like maybe it's in Tesla, maybe BMW, but there were definitely some cars where your access to using the seat warmer on the car that you spent a lot of money on is a subscription. And it's like, why is that a
So
subscription? Like,
crazy.
what? And yeah, so it's things like that that's wild.
It blows my
Yeah,
mind.
and I guess the world at large trying to go more towards maximizing shareholder value than trying to build nice things for people that can use them. And then, yeah, like tying people into subscription models for things that, yeah, they prefer to just own themselves.
Should not be.
Mm,
Yeah. I read that too, actually. I don't remember, was that Mercedes or BMW, I think?
mm,
It was one of the, higher line brands of
mm,
cars that I had heard that about too, which just really is like beyond frustrating because those things are already expensive, right? We make that investment into a vehicle or that investment into a washer and
mhm,
dryer or a fridge or whatever. We have to buy a dishwasher right now, so
mm,
I like am just so annoyed by it too because it's a two like our house is like it was a year and a half old when we got it, and now we've been in it for 2 years. So it's a 3 to 4 year old
mm,
house, right? Like the dishwasher is not old and it should be functioning, but because of how it's created today, like we can't fix it. My husband can fix anything really, unless it's like a smart
mm,
device. So I fully agree. It's frustrating. And then, thinking about sort of the subscription model, like it works
mm.
amazingly in software, right? But it doesn't mean that we need a subscription model in our cars
Yeah,
or in our washers or whatever other weird features we're going to have to
yeah,
start paying for.
100%. Actually,
Going to start a riot over this.
I was going to say just on that note. So when I bought this house about 5 years ago now, moved in, bought a new washing machine, and the option they had was a smart one. So there is an app where you can get a notification
Mm.
to say the washing's done, but which is somewhat
Yep.
useful. But it's also things like you could start it remotely. So you could like put the load in, but then you can go to another room, get your phone out and click it, and it will then turn on and things like that. That's like, I don't think we
Why?
need that. But then about a year ago, we got a tumble dryer to actually dry the clothes a little bit better. And that didn't have an app or anything. We were like, yes, good, doesn't need one. But now we're like, oh, it would be nice if we got a notification to say it was done. And it was like just how quickly we got
Or you
used
could add more time.
How quickly we got used to that now it's like, oh, now I have to remember that in like 3 hours I need to go and change the yeah.
Oh, you know what's really interesting about that is like, now we're kind of derailing a little bit, but I do think that this is just kind of a fun, entertaining conversation. Is that we have a farm, so we milk a cow every day. Milk cow will be cows. We raise beef. We kind of try to do whatever we can, have a garden, everything that we possibly can, to be more natural and to provide as much food as we can for ourselves. And it's just so interesting to like live this life. And we bought this farm about 2 years ago. It's the same house that I was talking about. And so it's been such a polar switch from normal life, right? Like we were in a housing development before, like, only had to mow our tiny little grass, and we have had land before, but not at the farm level. And it just has been actually such a wholesome experience to be like, whoa, I can't automate this. I can't automate my cow showing up in the stanchion and milking it. Like, yes, I can buy a milking robot and all the things, but if I wanted to, right? But it's like, it's just a harder life and it's just harder work. And it has me realizing, so I have 4 kids, and it just has me like realizing my kids are bored a lot during the day, especially now it's summer. They're like, what am I doing? I'm like, literally day 1 of summer, go find something to do outside. But it's just so interesting how technology just provides that level of ease, right? That convenience. Then all of a sudden we turn around and have to do something hard. And I don't know if you've noticed that, but we turn around and have to do something hard. And all of a sudden we're like, whoa, this is way too hard. Why is this work too hard? Like, this is really difficult. And it has sort of like just changed how we kind of look at, our day-to-day conveniences and the actual effort we have to put into whatever it is that we're doing.
That is really, and I guess as well, like even thinking, okay, I want carrots for dinner. So a year ago, I need to have planted carrots and I need to have looked after them for,
Yes.
Like just thinking about things like that and understanding just how much work actually goes into a regular level of life, let alone like a nice one.
Right.
So yeah, that must be really interesting. And just like a polar opposite to, and then you log on to your computer and it's like people in just doing all sorts of wacky things with their world.
Yep, getting groceries delivered versus like putting the seed in the ground to get the groceries later that I need. Yeah, it is very interesting. Okay, so you have multiple open source projects. So do you want to dive into some of the other projects that you're working on and like what you do with them, how they kind of came about, and whatever you want to share?
Good segue. So I guess going back to one of the things I mentioned with dependency management data is there was a project called Gorilla Toolkit which archived, and one of the things they were finding was people just weren't supporting them, and it was
that's really hard.
Yeah, and like one of the problems is open source as an ecosystem is great because you are putting things out for the good of everyone. In I think literally all of them open source licenses, there is something which says this is provided as is without warranty, and therefore lots of people misread that as, but if I have any issues, I can come and bug you, or I can chase you on PRs and issues and find out what's going on. And so one of the other projects I maintain is called OAPI CodeGen, which is an open API, RESTful API description standard to Go code generator. This is something I got involved in maintaining a few months after I joined Deliveroo, where the team I was working on was starting to do a new API. We were going to use OpenAPI as the standard for describing it. And I found this project, OAPI CodeGen, that looked pretty cool, that was doing stuff with it. And yeah, so I got involved, and so the segue there with Gorilla Toolkit is last month, so literally a couple of days ago, was May, which was Maintainer Month, which is generally a thing where companies like GitHub and the Open Source Initiative will try and do more to make companies and humans remember that there are humans behind the projects. And you're not just tagging a faceless blob.
So important.
Yeah, you're not just tagging a faceless blob that will respond to all your issues. It's someone who actually has like a life, or hopefully a life, behind the screen. It's someone who is overwhelmed by the number of issues and PRs that are piling up. And so what was really nice was I was interviewed by the Open Source Initiative for that, and I got to share like what it's like to be a maintainer for me, my personal experience. And what's also been really nice about that is the Open Source Initiative interviewed, I think, about 50 different people. And so you've got like a massive range of different experiences. So you've got like mine, which is a project with 7.2 thousand stars on GitHub. But then you've also got an interview with Mike McQuaid.
Ooh, look at you.
But then you've also got an interview with someone like Mike McQuaid, who's the maintainer of Homebrew, which has like all of the stars, and is a massive project with massive implications. And then you've also got someone who is generally working on more hobby projects and some smaller projects that are more they're just having fun. And it's really interesting to see the difference that different maintainers have, as well as also knowing that there are a number of people who've just burned out and will probably never return to maintaining a project because it's a bit too much.
Yeah, honestly, like it is sort of it's a really painful place. Like it's interesting too. So I started in open source. So I have such a deep passion for, this part of the ecosystem of just this giving, right? Of like wanting to just help other developers and like, hey, I don't want you to go through the same pain points I went through. So like, here's some code that I wrote, or here's some solutions I built. And you're doing it sort of out of the goodness of your heart, right? And then having sort of other people pick up on that and either rip it apart or consistently, send you messages or try to reach out to you. And it's not that you don't want to help them. That's the whole reason you put the open source project out there to begin with, because you're like, yes, go use it. I want to help you. But there's a difference between putting that project out there and helping folks and addressing, maintaining that project versus addressing small issues, and especially small issues that can be resolved if they would just put a little bit more time into researching or diving into figuring it out for themselves, which I think that is a major burnout point of just folks thinking that it's like, no, let me just ask the person instead of taking the extra steps of actually going and doing something about it. As I was saying this made me realize like maybe GitHub needs to work on a feature where it's like AI driven, where you're like, let me create a new issue in an open source project. And it's like, whoa, didn't try hard enough. You need to go try, because I can find the answer as AI out on the internet. So like, go try a little bit harder, or here's a code sample or a snippet, right? To alleviate some of this. Yeah, you look excited about this.
So I was going to say, on the other side, GitHub are just about to roll out a feature which allows you to get Copilot to create an issue for you. So they're doing the reverse of that.
That's powerful.
But they're now going to be introduced. But they're going to be introducing even more chance of maintainers having to deal with even more crap on top of stuff that they're already dealing with. And so I know there are a number of maintainers who, in a number of public and private forums, are trying to petition GitHub to say, please make this opt out. I mean, preferably opt in, but at least opt out. Because I do not want to have to deal with that. And I am fortunate that, touchwood, so far, I haven't had too many AI-driven concerns. But for instance, there's Daniel Stenberg of curl has been very vocal about this, where he is maintaining curl, gets a load of security reports, and a lot of them are from AI for method calls that don't exist, for command line flags that don't exist.
Oh, good grief.
Or even things that do exist but are never publicly exposed. So it's like, if I call this internal function that I could never call, everything goes wrong. And it's like, yeah, but you can't.
Yep.
And so I think as well, it's
You can't actually do that.
yeah, yeah. And so yeah, like there's definitely a number of pros that can come out of AI driven things like that. But there are also a lot of cons
Yep.
that if maintainers are already overstressed and overburdened, it just piles that on a little bit more when someone doesn't have to necessarily
Yeah.
think too hard before raising an issue. Yeah.
Right. Ooh, that is concerning. I wonder if maybe they're opting out would be great, but it'd be great if, like, in the issues, then that Copilot could kind of come alongside, right? Where it's like, hey, here's the reason this issue came about to begin with, and then have some way of processing. Is this an addressable issue in the open
Mhm.
source like project, right? Or is this something that's a one-off type of issue? Hey, sorry, I can't support you. This is just in your isolated environment, right? This isn't a part of the
Yeah.
project, but
And
oh, well,
yeah,
hopefully, like all AI advancements, sorry, hopefully it gets
yeah.
better.
And like on that point as well, a lot of maintainers find it hard to say no. Find it hard to not even necessarily like
Exactly.
instruct their boundaries, but just saying like, I do not want this feature, or I do not think it is
Mhm.
worth fixing this bug. That's really hard. And
Yep.
well, I've had a few times where I
Okay.
have been starting to say no a little bit more. Because, for instance, on OAPI CodeGen, there are a number of things that are design decisions. So, for instance, it only works with Go. So it only generates Go code. And people are like,
Mm.
oh, you could add, say, Rust or other output format. And I'm like, no, because A, I already do not have enough time to support the code base I know, or I don't even know the full code base, but
Yep.
the language I know better. I cannot add more stuff to this. This is only going to make things worse. And
Yep.
yeah, like for instance, last year I went through a rite of passage as an open source maintainer. I got my first very abusive email. Yay! Yeah,
Oh, here we
yeah. So that
go.
was fun. And yeah, like I'm fortunate to have only had one so far, and hopefully no one sees this
Yeah.
and sends another one. But yeah,
Don't send him another one, y'all, if you're listening, don't do it. Yeah, but I mean, it's just like this is like what is so painful about open source, but also like what is so beautiful about open source, right? Is this ability to just say, "Hey, I built a thing." I think one of the things that like a lot of open source maintainers struggle with, and I'd be curious to hear your take on this, is like being in DevRel for the last however many number of years, almost 10 years at this point in time. um, I feel like I have this natural ability to bring developers together and sort of help them see where they can get involved and really like elevate that. And I think that's a struggle. Do you feel like you've got any sort of like pro tips or maybe any pro complaints about elevating other folks, like, right, someone who came in and was like, oh, you could add Rust to this, like, cool, you could add Rust to this, like, it's open source, you can contribute, so how do you like handle that? Do you feel like that's a pain point as well?
yeah. So I think like one of the ones is yeah, like convincing people to fork the project. Um, and
Yep.
yeah, like one of the things, especially in the Go ecosystem, is it is very straightforward for someone to go in and fork it and run off their own fork because
Yep.
Go modules are built off GitHub repo or Git repos generally, and also maybe not Git repos,
Yep.
but they can just do that. And so that makes it really straightforward because if I am taking a while to get to a merge, to merge someone's changes or push a release out, I can say, well, you can fork it, but you can do that. Whereas in other ecosystems, for instance, in Java, you have to distribute built binaries like jar files and stuff, which makes it a lot harder if
Hmm.
you don't have all that infrastructure set up. So yeah, I'm
Sure.
very much pushing back as much as I can, trying to be as
Yeah.
respectful as I can be, but also one of the problems is a lot of the time, this open source time is like in the half hour before I go to bed, where I'll like
Right.
see a nudge from someone and I'll be like, okay, let me just quickly do a quick pass on a couple of issues. And it's like, it's not the best time for me to be doing it. And as I mentioned in the
Right.
prequel, like one of the things I'm super fortunate about is A, I have time to do open source. Like I am in a financial and life position where I can choose to do that in my free time.
Yep.
But also I get paid for it. There are a number of sponsors on
Yeah.
OAPI CodeGen who actually pay for my free time. And Elastic, my employer,
Mm, I love that.
also give me time on work to also work towards the project. So I'm in like a really good position compared to a lot of other maintainers. But that doesn't mean there's not a
Sure.
long way to go, and that I would prefer more sponsorship and more time to be able to work on the project because, yeah, trying to squeeze it in between other things is difficult. As I mentioned on the prequel, we're currently at 505 issues and 175 open PRs. And
Oof.
what I've kind of found is an issue is generally taking like 3 hours to get done, like for a lot of them.
Oh, that's a lot.
Yeah, to like there is no way I'm meaningfully getting through that without several years of investment, and things change over time, and yeah, so
Right.
it's a really hard one, and so yeah, like companies paying for time is a really good way of getting that done, because yeah, otherwise it's just not getting done.
Yeah. I think it also helps when companies do that, it really helps like boost morale. I don't know for you, right? But whenever I've been in a role where I can give back to open source and it's a part of my day-to-day job, it just makes me feel better. And I don't really know why. Maybe
Mhm.
because it stems back to sort of our roots, right? Of like, we want to give away answers. We want to help our peers. We want to, provide solutions when we can, because that's just how our brains work. But at the same time, it's like we can't always do it, right? When we're confined to that day-to-day job. But like you said, even when they do sponsor that work, it doesn't mean you're getting through all the issues, and it doesn't mean that you're getting through all those PRs, right? And so there's always this
Mhm.
sort of daunting feeling, it can seem like, with some of these projects that are adopted, which also makes you feel good too. So it's like this emotional roller coaster, right? You're like, I'm giving out
Mhm.
my solutions, yay. Oh, I have issues to deal with that I'd have no time to address, and you want to, and then you're like, but that means people are using it, right? So it's just it
Yeah,
feels like a roller coaster.
100%, and especially for or my impression of like maybe newer maintainers who haven't necessarily had a project like lift off like that before will be like,
Yep.
oh, cool, I'm going to do like as much time as I can on this project to
Mm-hmm.
try and increase people using it, get more adoption, fix issues, fix issues, ship features.
Yep.
Um, and inevitably they will burn out because they have spent just
Mm-hmm.
so long doing all the stuff. And one of two things will happen: either people will move away, and like before they've burnt out, people will move away and then they'll feel sad,
Yep.
or more people will use it and they'll be even more burnt out. And yeah, it's one of those problems
Exactly.
that yeah, Mike McQuaid has written a lot of things about being an open source maintainer, and some of it is like know your boundaries, set them,
Mm-hmm.
make sure you are setting yourself up to be like able to do this.
Yeah.
And someone else I see is Reese Arkins, who's the creator of Renovate, the dependency management tool, which I'm also a
Mm-hmm.
massive fan of. And Reese is like still on the issue tracker. He is still helping people. Um,
Oh.
and so not only is some of his day job working on Renovate, he's
Yep.
also spending his free time answering like bug reports and stuff of people that is
Mm-hmm.
like, if you read the docs, you would know why this isn't working. Please
Yeah,
just
just put
read
a
the docs.
little more
And
time. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And it is amazing
Uh,
when you see these maintainers who've been doing it for years, and it is generally because they have learned to set the boundaries, to understand what is reasonable, um, to give themselves some grace, to be like, you know what, actually, I'm not going to do anything this week. I am going to make
yep.
sure I take the time to switch off, or to work on something that I'm interested in, not looking at the bugs and features that people are raising for me. I'm going to go and do something I want to do, to remind myself that I
Mm-hmm.
enjoy the project, rather than just dealing with the, hey, this thing doesn't work. Why isn't this thing done? Yeah.
Yep. I fully, fully, fully agree. I feel like I actually kind of went through a moment like that. And sometimes I think those moments of And what I mean by a moment like that, a moment where I've realized that I need to say no. And I'm like, I'm 40 years old. I should know that I need to say no. But it's one of those things of like, that's just not my heart, right? My heart is like, let me help, let me help, let me help. But I think when you get burned by a situation, right? Your email that you got, your rite of passage or whatever it might be,
Mhm.
when you have those moments of sort of hurt feelings or actually truly being hurt by an individual, I think it really sort of puts you in that space of being able to be like, whoa, why am I doing this, right? Why am I giving so much if it's not actually being positively received? Which is also hard because you know that there are tons of people that are positively receiving it, but that sort of outlier of negativity can really, really get you down. So anyways, I felt like I had kind of a moment like that back in February. And so it's actually been very, very beautiful to just be able to say no, right? When messages come in from people I don't know and I don't really owe them anything. Oh, this is even hard to say out loud, but I don't really owe them anything. Like I can ignore them. But it's been so hard for me to do that in the past. And so I think that probably comes to a lot of open source world, right? Of like, we want to help consistently and it's hard to find that boundary and balance. But kudos to anyone who has found it. I still suck at it.
And as you say, like the whole point of open source is doing things to share with the greater world, and to
Exactly.
like to put it kind of a little bit more flowery, like we're trying to do things for the good of humanity, if you want to
Uh-huh.
do it like that.
Exactly.
And then when someone like asks for help, you want to help, but also
Hmm.
you cannot scale yourself as well, and you do need to know when to say no. And yeah, this is also hard for me to say because I know I do not say no as much as I should do. So yeah.
Same, same. I'm working on it though. It's a work in progress. Okay, so I would love to ask, maybe like a two-parted final question
Mhm.
before we wrap up the episode. You had just mentioned, one of the tools that you love using. I would love to hear about sort of what your stack is, right? You've mentioned NeoVim, you're a fan of that, Renovate that you just mentioned. What sort of other things that you love to just have in your kind of developer toolbox? I know it's a
Um,
loaded question.
yeah, so there are a few things. I think the one thing that I surprisingly haven't talked about as much as I could have is my blog. And the reason for
Ooh.
this is like multifold. So the first one is this is generally the place I'll go if I'm stuck with something, because
I love
so one of
that.
the things I do is I call it blogumentation. So it's blogging as a form of documentation. Um, and I picked this up from Scott Hanselman, who famously has a website called Keys Left, I think it is. And it
Hmm.
calculates how many keystrokes you have left before you die of natural causes based on age and everything.
Yep.
And it's one of those things that has stuck with me and has been, again, like literally changed the way I work.
Mm,
And some of it is also with ADHD, because I now don't need to
yep.
remember each and everything I've done and how I did it. I just need to vaguely remember, have I written a blog post about it before? And
Oh, that's amazing.
it it honestly changed. Like I find it really useful because it's public and it's easy for me to go to. You don't have to do a public thing,
Exactly.
um, but it's the sort of thing like I get. I think last year it was over 300,000 hits a year on my blog,
Ooh, dang.
but that also doesn't include things like people who have privacy protection, ad blockers and stuff. So the
Hmm.
numbers higher.
For sure.
It has also, I do also get
Right.
referrals from things like ChatGPT, so I also know that they are slurping up my data.
Oh, wow.
Um, but yeah, it's the sort of
Yep.
thing that I have found. I think through writing, and also
Hmm.
writing it and getting it out of my head is a great way to then
Yeah.
be able to come back to it later and not know the full thing, but know enough of it that I can refer back to it.
Hmm.
So that's one thing that is honestly really, really useful tool in my arsenal, is just writing things down, and getting used to writing things, and also getting used to writing things in public that aren't necessarily great. Like it doesn't have to be the best thing,
Hmm.
but it is out there.
Yep.
And yeah, that's probably one of the big ones. And
Well, just
yeah.
a quick follow up before you mention the rest of
Mhm.
your tools. I don't want to interrupt you by any means, but I want to call out how powerful this is because, like Alex, so Alex just jumped in and wrote Blogumentation with a thumbs up in the chat. He's over on LinkedIn watching. And I love that. Alex is new. He's actually in the Waco area and he came to the developer meetup that I launched last week, which is just amazing to get to meet new people. And so he's, in that junior space. And so I bet that like he can go pick up your blog, right? This Blogumentation and learn so much because you're actually sort of dumping, your thoughts and your process and how you're getting there. And like, wow, that is literally probably the most powerful content that developers could consume, honestly. So major cheers to that.
And for instance, like, so just looking back at my website, I wrote my first Blogumentation thing like 4 months into my job. It was some point last year. I hit 1,000 blog posts, and I'm currently on. What's the number? Let me just check live. I'm currently on 1,135, and so like it's one of those things
That's
that
incredible.
has helped like write a load of things. I also write week notes, which is just a way for me to kind of process what happened in the week. And I've been doing that since 2020, so that also adds a number of posts. But it's the sort of thing that writing has definitely helped and helped me process things. It's helped also, like from a junior developer, it helped me build more kind of like social capital, because I was then being seen as, oh, I was a mid-level developer, but I had posts on Hacker News's front page. There's things like that it's like, oh, that's pretty cool. Or
Exactly.
I love that, Mike. Thank you very much.
Me too.
Yeah, it's the sort of thing that makes a big difference. And like I have had job offers, or definitely very strong leads off the back of just being someone who is writing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'd very much recommend that as a thing that people do.
I could see that, yeah, because they get to, from a hiring standpoint, right? Like, my last role was an engineering manager, and I just absolutely hated when companies were like, "This is how we're going to interview," and I'm like, "No, this is not how I'm going to interview." Like, I don't think that whiteboarding and code tests and all that things is valuable because we can go find that content. And so what you're doing, right, is you're actually working through how you're problem solving. And to me, that is gold. Like that is exactly what an engineering manager or someone who is hiring wants to see is like, can they just work through a problem? Because that's the root, right? There's Google and AI and all the things that can get us the right answers, but can we figure out how to get the right answer and where the actual problem is? So yeah, I bet that's absolute fire.
100%.
Yeah. All right. What about technical tools? What else is in your toolbox besides this amazing blogumentation that you do?
So I generally gravitate towards local tools. So things that I can run on my local Linux machine.
Yep.
And so, for instance, like one of the things I did a lot of in the past was working with things like JSON web tokens. And so there is a website called jwt.io that you can go in and you can paste very sensitive credentials into. And so one of my blog posts that went very popular was, you should be doing things like that. You should be using local tooling. And so again, kind of a non-answer is write your own tools. I have written a number of
Yeah.
little things
Ooh.
that instead of needing to go to an online website to pretty print a JSON file, I have a thing locally that gives me all that control. I can use it in different work streams. I can learn more about scripting. And in fact, like pretty printing JSON is something that I think I've got like 8 or 9 articles on, because it's like loads of different languages or tools and ways of doing it. That's one of those ones. But yeah, so because I like more local stuff, one of the things I've also done is I didn't really get into like AI and large language models, LLMs, until fairly recently, because I didn't want to send all my data to a third party. So I've been using Olama to run local models.
Mm,
That's been fairly good. Like, not nearly as good as if you were sending it to a very expensive data center who have much more data than can run
sure.
a local model. But it has been really interesting
Yep.
for actually understanding a bit more around how LLMs work, what sort of things I can do to integrate them into
Hmm.
my tool chain, while also playing around with things like actual GitHub Copilot and using the various models that
Yep.
they make available. Yeah.
Very cool. Well, I love that. Michael loves it too. 100% agree. Local tooling for the win. Michael also came from the Waco developer meetup from
Nice.
last week. So which I'm super pumped about. It's I don't know about you locally and if you've had the chance to go to meetups, but I feel like pre-COVID it was like developer meetups were such a beautiful thing, right? Come and talk shop and compare notes and just hang out with people who understood and were like you. And they kind of died off during COVID. And so I've had this like yearning for this local community again. And I'm so happy to see two of them in the chat right now. So I'm just a little giddy over here about this
Yeah.
building of community.
And like, it's great that you are being the change and setting that up. So I'm in Nottingham in the UK, and at the height of it pre-COVID, we had, I think it was 28 meetups a month. So you could potentially like go to one a day and just not pay for any dinners.
Exactly.
But yeah, like after
Forgot about
yeah
that. Note.
yeah after like the height of the pandemic, things haven't really recovered. And yeah,
Mhm.
it's one of those things that's difficult. And like my partner was co-organizer of one of the big meetups. One of the troubles with trying to restart it is okay, but people don't want to go back to or aren't going back to the office on the days that they would usually go. The event spaces aren't as easy to get. So how do you convince
Mhm.
people to come in to town for like 2 hours and a mediocre pizza when they can stay at home and
Yep.
enjoy time with their family and yeah, do all the things they
Yep.
want to do. Yeah.
Yeah. I know it's hard because we got so comfortable being at home, which is like it's great. I love being at home. I love working at home. I've got my farm right behind my computer screen. Like I can see my pretty cows. It's beautiful here. But at the same time, I think that like, we can also, and like for me, and we talked about this in the prequel, right? I'm kind of coming out of sort of a dark few months of life that was just really hard to get through. And I think that we often can find ourselves in sort of those spaces and not realize that maybe the people and the connections that we had around us were actually sort of fueling us in a positive way. So I'm just trying to bring back some of that positivity that's like, yes, we have to leave our house. I know that's kind of lame, but at the end of the day, it's more powerful.
100%.
Super quick answer there, Chris. Chris is on X and commenting. That's awesome that you still go to meetups. There definitely still exist, but if you're in like SF or New York or very very heavy cities, or if your meetup survived or revived itself right after COVID, right? But I don't see that in my area. But I'm also in a really small city, so to also answer your question, Chris, some folks are on YouTube and some are on LinkedIn. And so, unfortunately, the chat kind of culminates on our side through the stream from all the different channels of which this is actually streamed in. So, Chris, if you want to catch them, some people are on LinkedIn and some are on YouTube. Jamie, this has been amazing. Such a great conversation. Loved hearing about your projects, your work, like internal tool building, productivity. Love productivity. Again, we kind of talked about what the ADHD. I feel like productivity for us is like coping methods, right? That's how we just get to
Yeah.
exist, is like when everything is organized and where it needs to be.
100%.
So it's always something I love nerding out on. So yeah. Anything else you want to share before we wrap up the show?
Again, thanks very much for having me. It's been great to chat. Yeah, like the easiest way of following me is jvt.me/elsewhere. I've got links to
Ooh,
all of the different social platforms that exist because there are now too many to put on a slide. So yeah.
love that.
Yeah.
For folks, again, that is jvt.me. So you can find that amazing blog documentation where you can go connect with Jamie, check out all of his awesome open source projects, the amazing content that he writes, and every awesome other thing that he's working on. This has been absolutely lovely. Thank you for coming on the show. I hope that everyone has a fabulous rest of their day.
Thanks, folks. Bye.